Hello, fellow Movie Crusaders, and welcome to another episode of Sean's Movie Crusades. My name's Sean Wasserkrug, and today we're reviewing the sequel to the 1980s The Shining, Doctor Sleep. Now, for me, this year was the first year that I think I've ever seen The Shining from beginning to end. Now, I've seen most of the big parts of The Shining throughout my life, and the many, many parodies of The Shining, mainly The Simpsons. I'd never actually watched it from beginning to end before until this year, and so when I watched it from beginning to end, I wasn't necessarily that high on it. Like, I thought it was fine for what it was, but I definitely didn't think that The Shining was one of the greatest horror films of all time. So when I heard that Doctor Sleep was coming out, I wasn't necessarily excited for it, but I mean, I definitely wasn't against seeing it. But then, of course, they casted Ewan McGregor as Danny Torrance, which definitely piqued my interest because I love Ewan McGregor. He is definitely my Obi-Wan Kenobi. And I've liked Ewan in pretty much almost anything he's ever done. And then they also casted Rebecca Ferguson as the main antagonist of the film, Rose the Hat, and I think she's a fantastic actress. I love her in the Mission Impossible franchise, and of course, she was solid in The Greatest Showman. So that right there with those two being casted, it definitely piqued my interest overall. So I had heard pretty solid things coming into it. I was supposed to review this last week, but obviously, as you can tell by me coughing, I came down with a bug, so I wasn't able to see it then. So I went and saw it basically about 2 hours ago, and now I'm doing the review for you now. So let's go ahead and jump into the review of Doctor Sleep and see exactly what I thought of it. So the basic plot of Doctor Sleep is it does kind of jump around. It's basically follows the story of the adult Danny Torrance. Like I said, we jump from 1980, where we actually see the after effects of Stanley Kubrick's The Shining and what happens after Danny and his mother Wendy leave the Overlook Hotel. We then jump ahead to the 2011, where we see a very rough Danny kind of going through his life, dealing with the tragic things that happened when he was a kid, and also obviously dealing with The Shining. And then we eventually jump into present day, where we see Danny where he is today. But the main plot of the story is that there's this group called the True Knot, and they're basically, the best way to describe them is they're basically like psychic vampires, and basically they feed off of people who are special or who have the shining, in a sense, because feeding off of these people gives them longer life, like vampires. Keeps them looking young, keeps them, living for very, very long patches of lifetime. And basically they feed off the people by torturing them, because pain and fear makes what they call the steam of the essence of the shining stronger. So basically they hunt down these special people, torture and kill them, or turn them, depending on how powerful they can be or how beneficial they could be to the group. And then that's basically what they're doing. They're led by Rose the Hat, who's played by Rebecca Ferguson. And then they stumble upon a very, very powerful child who goes by the name of Abra Stone, played by Kaylee Curran, who has also in the process been shining connections to Danny himself. When Abra basically sees the True Knot murder a child, she is determined to find a way to stop them and enlists the aid of Danny to help them doing it, which eventually leads them back to the one place that Danny never wanted to see again, and that is the Overlook Hotel. So that's basically the general plot of Doctor Sleep. What works with Doctor Sleep is quite a bit of it. I really, really enjoyed this film. I had a blast watching this movie. The musical score is incredibly well done by the Newton brothers. Michael Flanagan is the director. He also did the screenplay and the editing for the film. I'm a big fan of Michael Flanagan. I loved The Haunting of Hill House like most people did last year when it was on Netflix. He's really good at shooting horror. He's got many great horror films out there right now. Hush is one. Gerald's Game, I think, is the other one. You guys should go out of your way to watch those. They're very good. But obviously, Haunting of Hill House was definitely his highlight. And he'll have season 2 coming up here down the road. So knowing that Flanagan was going to be doing Dr. Sleep definitely was a lot helpful for me to kind of be more on the positive side with this film. You'll also, if you're a fan of Haunting of Hill House, you'll be excited to see some Haunting of Hill House faces in this movie because they do pop up. I'm not going to say who they play in the film, but you will notice them and go, oh, that's one of the kids, or that's one of the adult versions of the kids who pop up in the film. Ewan McGregor does a fantastic job as Danny Torrance. It's one of my favorite performances of the year. He goes through many changes as Danny, as from the scared kid to an alcoholic to a drug user to a sobriety changed man to basically having to kind of step up to what the powers that have been given to him to try and stop evil once and for all. And Ewan McGregor does a fantastic job doing it. A huge standout though is Kaylee Curran, who plays Abra. She is one of her first films roles, and she knocks it out of the park. She's definitely a highlight in the film. Her chemistry with Ewan McGregor is fantastic, and her chemistry with Rebecca Ferguson is incredibly well done as well. And every time she's on screen, she does a great job overall. She's got that swagger that plays beautifully and doesn't come off annoying. But the biggest standout of this film overall has to go to Rebecca Ferguson as Rose the Hat. She's given just about as much screen time as Ewan McGregor and Abra, and Rebecca Ferguson chews up the scene. She's one of the best performances of the year, and she plays, like I said, the leader of the True Knot, and she kills it in every scene. She's having a blast playing this character, but she also plays it with an emotional level that gives more layers to the character of Rose the Hat than just being a generic villain. There are times where she can tell that she cares about her group and she cares about their well-being. And while yes, she's bloodthirsty and hungry and stuff like that, she wants what's best for her group and will do anything she can to keep them safe while also helping them, feed on whoever they can find that has the shine, as they call it. Another standout who also doesn't get enough recognition is Cliff Curtis. He plays Billy Freeman, who ends up becoming basically the best friend of Danny Torrance. Cliff Curtis is a fantastic actor. For anyone who watched Fear the Walking Dead, he was on the first few seasons of that, and he did a great job on there. He's always one of those actors that just kind of pops up as a co-star role, usually not on screen for very long, but when he's on screen, he does a great job. And in this one, he definitely gets a lot more to do than he does in a lot of movies, and Cliff Curtis does a great job overall. Another standout for me is Zahn McClarnon. Maybe people might know him from Westworld. He plays Crow Daddy, who's basically Rose the Hat's number 2, potentially a boyfriend. I mean, we don't get a clear-cut answer on that in the movie, but I mean, they definitely have an attraction and a chemistry with one another, and I think he is one of the highlights of the film as well. The way he just kind of moves like smoke through the film. He just comes in. And he just kind of takes over the scene, whether he's talking to Rose the Hat or other characters. And I think Zahn does a great job overall, and hopefully this opens the doors for him to do more roles like this, or at least gets him out there to get big roles in general outside of this and Westworld. Emily Allen Lynn, as she plays Snakebite Andy. She's pretty great in her small co-starring role as well. Every time she's on screen, she's an actress that you stand there and you take notice of. And she does great in her role as well. I think that's it for actors and actresses that I want to point out. The visuals of this film are amazing. Like I said, music was done great. You can tell when things are going to go to a certain range because of the way the music goes. It definitely keeps you on the edge of your seat throughout the film. There's one scene, and I know everyone's going to know this scene when I talk about it, with a young actor, who I'm not going to say who it is. Anyone who knows Hollywood's going to know this actor the minute they see them. Even I was like, is that blank? Like, I actually stayed to the end credits. I was like, if they got blank just to play this role, fantastic. And it ended up, yes, being that person. It is definitely one of the hardest scenes to watch this year. In terms of horror and just making you generally uneasy watching it as it happens. And I mean that in the most positive way. This scene's not going to work for a lot of people. There was actually one person who left the theater for this scene because I guess that she just couldn't take it. But it is a very hard scene to get through, and they do linger over it for quite a while. But it is acted beautifully the whole way through, and it definitely leaves you sitting there uneasy with what you just watched. But the scene is incredibly powerful, and it is what it becomes the driving force for the two protagonists in Danny and Abra throughout the film. So it is a very much needed scene. It's a fantastically well acted scene and directed as well by Flanagan and by the young actor who plays in the role. But yeah, the third act is where everything kind of connects to Stanley Kubrick's The Shining. Some people might not like that. I personally loved it because it's the one part of the film that actually made it feel like a sequel outside of it just being Danny Torrance. Like I said, while I'm not a big fan of The Shining, I like that they brought The Shining back into this film. Was it needed? Probably not, in a sense, but I liked what they did with it, and the callbacks were nice throughout, and I enjoyed that third act because of what it was. I can tell how, like, people who love the books, they're not going to like this third act, but I've never read either The Shining or Dr. Sleep, so that didn't bother me. So I really loved the third act for what it was. Like I said, it's 2.5 hours. It is a longer film, but I feel like this movie was incredibly well done by Michael Flanagan, and the cast, and the way it was shot, and the way the music was done, and the horror elements to it, and just the story in general, I thought was incredibly well-paced and done throughout the entire film. Now, what does not work with Dr. Sleep, like I said, it is a book, so there's a lot of setup, because we're not jumping into, like, yes, the beginning is very Shining heavy, like, the first 15 minutes is very, like, this is what happened right after The Shining. And then, of course, the third act is very Shining heavy. But once we jump ahead to, like, 2011, we have to basically start fresh like a brand new movie. So there's a lot of build-up and a lot of setup to kind of build the world of these characters. So the first 45 minutes of this movie might be considered slow for a lot of people watching the film. I personally thought it was fine because I understood that we needed to build the world of where Danny was as an adult now, and where the top knots were, or true knots, not top knots, the true knots, and basically everything going on at that time. And while, yes, it's not necessarily exciting or heart-racing, it is much needed in terms of building the characters and the story for what we were about to see. But I can see where that could be a negative for people because it is a slow start to the film. Another part of the film, it's not necessarily bad, but it definitely kind of takes you out of the film is in the moment, is that they do recast Danny, Wendy, and Jack when they do shots of The Shining. So Shelley Duvall, they recasted Shelley Duvall with a let's see, let me see if I can find the actress's name, which at first I was like, did they de-age Shelley Duvall? And it's like, no, this is just another actress by the name of Alex Esso. She actually does a really good job. There's times where she's acting where it's like, oh wow, she's actually doing a really good Shelley Duvall impression. Like, outside of just her looking not at all like Shelley Duvall. I mean, they did her hair up. I mean, like, if you put them side by side, Alex Esso looks nothing like Shelley Duvall. But she did a solid job. The kid actor who played young Danny, Roger Dale Floyd, I mean, he was fine for what he was, but doesn't look anything like Danny. Like, another thing. That's the problem, is that, like, while they try their best to make them look like the previous actors and actresses, but they don't do a good job of doing that. But their performances are solid for the most part. You also got Carl Lumbly. He played Dick Halloran. And I thought his was actually the best probably overall, because his was the one character that I thought transitioned pretty well from the old actor and into the new without making you go, well, he doesn't look right. I thought Carl Lumbly did a great job playing Dick Halloran. Like I said, Alex Essos did a good job of portraying Shelley Duvall as Wendy Torrance, but clearly doesn't look like her. And Roger Dale Floyd as young Danny, I could take it or leave it. Obviously, of course, the big one is Jack Torrance. The actor that they chose, which I believe is one of the Haunted of Hill House actors, Henry Thomas, doesn't look anything like Jack. It's basically a guy who is wearing a Jack Nicholson wig. He does not do a Jack Nicholson impression. He's basically just talking normally to Danny in the scene that we do get of him with Jack, which it's a great scene. I'm not saying it's a bad scene at all, but he does not do a Jack Nicholson impression, so you can kind of chalk it up to the hotel is basically putting on a performance of Jack, and not it being the actual Jack Torrance himself. But it's kind of one of those, like, it's weird because, you know, if you've watched, especially if you watched The Shining recently, you just know that it's not, like, you're not the right actor or actress for this role, and you kind of just have to kind of get used to it. Now, once after, like, the first minute or two, you're fine, and you get into it, and it's totally okay, but it definitely takes you out of the film right when they do it. So I will have to kind of go on more of the side of the negative with it. I understand why they did this over the de-aging, because the de-aging does look weird, and it would be very hard to de-age a young Danny again, but yeah, so in terms of what doesn't work, that's really the only things I really didn't, like per se for the film, is that it's a little slow to start, and the, just like I said, the recasting of the main three characters of The Shining worked, but just takes you out of the movie or the main four characters, sorry, takes you out of the movie for a brief moment, but then brings you back in. So going to overall thoughts of Dr. Sleep, I thought it was a really great film. I really, really love this movie. It is definitely one of my favorite films of the year. Like I said, been saying that a lot lately. I loved what they did with this film. It made me want to go back and rewatch The Shining again because of what I had just seen. And I remember a few months back when I saw The Shining, I was like, I really have no interest in seeing this movie again. Now I do want to go back and see The Shining again because of Dr. Sleep, and I thought it was an incredibly well done film. Great cast, especially out of Rebecca Ferguson, Ewan McGregor, and Kaylee Curran. Also, like I mentioned, Cliff Curtis and Zahn McLaren and Emily Allen Lynn. Like I said, they all did a great job as well. Like I said, great story, great music, great horror effects, great third act for me personally when they go back to the Overlook Hotel, which is a spoiler, but it's not a spoiler because it's in the trailers, so you can't really get mad at me for that. But yeah, so going into my overall score for Dr. Sleep, I'm going to give it a 9.2 out of 10, which does place Dr. Sleep into the top 10 of 2019 so far, with Avengers Endgame at number 1, Jojo Rabbit at number 2, Ford v Ferrari at number 3, Toy Story 4 at number 4, Joker at 5, Parasite at 6, Rocket Man at 7, with Dr. Sleep coming in at number 8, Peanut Butter Falcon at 9, with El Camino, a Breaking Bad movie at number 10, with Booksmart dropping out of the top 10. I hope you guys enjoyed this review, and if you guys did, go and hit that like button. If you guys feel like this review is worth sharing, go ahead and hit that share button. But most importantly, don't forget to hit that subscribe button to the channel so you guys stay up to date with all the latest videos that pop up on Sean's Movie Crusades. Coming up next week, let's see what we got here for movies coming out. We've got Frozen 2 coming out next week, so definitely be on the lookout for that review. And then, was it a beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, I think is what it's called? The Mr. Rogers film with Tom Hanks as the starring role. I'm definitely going to check that one out pretty bad. I want to see that movie so bad. So be on the lookout for those reviews. And then on November 20th, we start the new series on Sean's Movie Crusades, the Movie Crusaders ride through the Star Wars galaxy. As each episode, we basically take a look at each episodic film of Star Wars, with Episode 1, Phantom Menace, being the first episode on the 20th, with every other episode showing up on the following Monday and Wednesday, leading up to The Rise of Skywalker on December 19th. So be on the lookout for that and the reviews that are coming up next week. And until next time, in case I don't see you, good morning, good afternoon, and good night, Movie Crusaders.